I welcome everybody to this panel. I welcome Dominican Republic and I welcome World Congress as we start today our communication on the extremely important issues devoted to the collective indigenous and minority rights. Let me introduce myself. I am Borys Babin. I'm professor from Ukraine, representing some universities, including Aviation University, International Humanitarian University, and Association for Integration of Crimea and Crimea and Other Resource Center. And also already I want to represent the honorable panelists that we are here. I think I should represent first of all Dr. Peter Umeadi as representative of Nigeria, and also Javier Elash, director of representative of, as I do understand, please, what state do you represent? Yes, yes, I see. So we have, I see two panel police participants in audience, yes, and nobody online. So I think first of all I should give floor to the panelists that are present in the room, yes, and later we should discuss. I may give my own presentation, and after this we should discuss these issues, question and answers online. So please, I think we should give the floor to Honorable Dr. Umeadi. Dr. Umeadi, do you hear me? So the floor is yours. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. And we're talking about indigenous rights, cultural practices, international migrations, and universal human rights protection at this World Law Conference in Santo Domingo. I will go forward to make a presentation, all protocols observed. Here is what I have. There is a massive displacement of indigenous entities ongoing in Nigeria. The official description of these displaced persons is internally displaced persons, IDP. These internally displaced persons are headed into camps. The Nigerian government are not able to grapple with the dynamics of providing for the camps, and the international community have shown scant interest to these abandoned peoples. The displacement is finding occurrence across Nigeria. However, it is playing out with ferocity in the north, affecting original Hausa communities in Kaduna, Yobe, and Gombe, and now the scorched peoples of the Middle Belt in places like Benue, Plateau, Taraba, Adamawa, for example. The origin of this irredentism dates back to the 1900s of the Fulani Jihad, wherein the autochthonous Hausa communities were subdued by a combination of warfare and guile and forcibly converted to Islam from their hitherto animist inclinations. The victor adopted Hausa language as lingua franca and imposed their political rulership over them. The same subjugation enveloped the Middle Belt, which was part of northern Nigeria, and extended to the western region via Lokoja to Oyo. Only the eastern region was spared the spread of the jihad at the time. The British conveniently superimposed their colonial administration on the gains of the Fulani Jihad in Nigeria. The dire situation got accentuated with the perception that despite the reality of the 1952 to 1953 census, the British manipulated the delineation of seats in the parliament, which allotted a chunky half to the north, leaving the ostensibly more populated east and west to share the remainder. Now, at independence, with executive power in hands of the irredentist, in their hands, the irredentist inclinations of the North had ripened from the days of the Fulani Jihad. In the contentious presidential elections of 2015, it has been said that the Fulani, whose numbers are quite insignificant, in a bid to retain their hold on political power, designed and announced to the world that Nigeria is an inherited land of the Fulani, and that Fulani, wherever they may be, should come and settle in Nigeria. The avalanche happened. Droves of Fulani from all over Africa made it to Nigeria's notorious porous borders, crossed and settled. They, not being indigenous to Nigeria, had no roots, no land, no home there. They came with their cattle in their nomadic lifestyle. They first settled in the bushes. Next, they were attacking the indigenous communities in Hausa land and Middle Belt, who were predominantly Christians, butchering men, women, and children in their sleep, chasing them from their ancestral land and occupying same. The original owners of the land found themselves in the internally displaced persons IDP camps. These camps now dot all over northern Nigeria. The irony is that in many places, the Fulani communities indigenous to Nigeria have become victims of their invited brethren. Also, prominent non-Fulani Nigerians who aided the Fulani rise and acquisition of power now watch as the land of their kith and kin are grabbed and many of their own massacred, while the government they fostered looked the other way. In the carnage that triggered the displacements, a worrisome pattern has emerged. Police and army invariably arrive at the scene of crime long after the victims have been dispossessed of their ancestral homeland and have fled. The attackers remain on their newly conquered land in the full view of the powers that be. No one hears about whether the perpetrators are apprehended or brought to justice. Talks in official quarters are on how to resettle the displaced persons on new land. There are no efforts to restore normalcy and return the indigenes to their ancestral homes from the squalid camps which they have been condemned to. Many evacuated places have been remained by the Fulani newcomers. These conquered lands, especially in the Middle Belt, are ultra-fertile and represent the food basket of the whole country. The new landlords do not farm. It is inconceivable the wasted opportunity which their land grab brought about. As a matter of fact, the Fulani herdsmen have disrupted and devastated farming of crops for export and for subsistence nationwide. Their free-ranging cattle destroy crops in farms of indigenous people, starting fights and shootouts. It is alleged that the herdsmen rape women in their farms. They retaliate any harm done to their destructive cattle with force of undue proportion, as it is said that they value the life of their cattle more than human life. They are said to engage in widespread kidnapping. All over Nigeria, no region is spared at the moment. The Fulani incursions have been recorded in forests in all geographical zones where they are called Fulani herdsmen. They kidnap, sometimes busload of commuters, demand and receive ransom. The law enforcement agencies in Nigeria do not contain or trace how these ransom funds move. Some funds are drawn from the banks. The Fulani attackers come with AK-47 rifles and other sophisticated guns, fueling the suspicion that they are supplied by state actors. The headsmen brandish AK-47 rifles and nobody asks questions despite the strict firearm laws. The indigenous peoples are prosecuted for owning mere hunting guns and then guns. Recently, the Nigeria Supreme Court sentenced a native farmer to death by hanging. See suit number SC.CR/1026/2022, Sunday Jackson against the state. The farmer had engaged a herdsman whose cattle destroyed his labors on his farm. The herdsman brandished their ubiquitous dagger to stab the farmer, and a mortal struggle ensued. The farmer disarmed the herdsman and used the dagger on the herdsman who died. The Supreme Court decided that at the point the farmer won the dagger, he should have fled from his assailant and trespasser on his farm and should not have used the dagger to kill him. It is time for the international community to pay more attention to Nigeria, especially on matters of indigenous rights, international migrations, and universal human rights protection. Thank you for listening. Well, that is the summary of what is happening about migration, about rights in Nigeria. I'll leave it at that, and as we go ahead, I can follow up with whatever comments that are required. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your extremely great, fruitful contribution. And of course, situation in African states, as in Nigeria, so in others, are extremely hard. And it also gives us an examples of needs and duties of further development of international standards in various areas, as regarding the IDPs, the displaced persons, so migrants, so minorities, and countering racial discrimination, countering Nazism, and countering the issues of violation of the rights of indigenous peoples. And now, if you hear me, of course, I want to give floor to another panelist, Mr. Javier Hage, who will represent his vision of these challenges and problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Borys. I appreciate you giving me the I know that the official language of the conference is English, but since I speak Spanish as a native language, I wanted to ask, ¿están todo bien con el inglés o prefieren que hable en español? En español? So Borys, with your, I'll just give a brief introduction for your benefit, and then I'll speak in Spanish because the majority of the audience has asked for us. So by way of introduction, Borys, I am the Chief Legal Officer at the Human Rights Foundation, which is a New York-based nonprofit that focuses in countries across the world. And my speech is gonna be about how democracies do a better job than dictatorships in protecting minority rights. Okay? Ahora paso al español. Yo soy originalmente del oriente de Bolivia, y por eso mi acento por ahí no lo van a ubicar, porque lo van a hallar un poco raro, porque no hay mucha gente. Somos como de Bolivia, que tiene 10 millones de habitantes, somos como 2 millones, la parte que minoritaria. Entonces, cuando conozcan a un boliviano, probablemente su acento sea diferente. Bueno, si es del oriente de Bolivia va a ser como el mío, si es del occidente de Bolivia van a pronunciar las S al final de las palabras mejor que yo, etcétera, etcétera. Es como más parecido al mexicano. Digamos que mi acento es más parecido al dominicano y el del occidente de Bolivia es más parecido al mexicano. Y yo tengo la suerte, soy abogado en Bolivia y también en Estados Unidos, tengo la suerte de vivir en Estados Unidos desde hace 18 años y luego de hacer un máster en Derecho Internacional en la Universidad de Columbia, comencé a trabajar en esta organización que en ese momento estaba creciendo, estaba naciendo prácticamente, pero que este año ha cumplido ya 20 años como organización internacional que aboga por los derechos humanos a nivel global. Y una cosa que nos hace distintos como organización de derechos humanos a otras organizaciones del movimiento de derechos humanos, organizaciones tradicionales importantes como Amnistía Internacional o Human Rights Watch, una de las cosas que nos hace distintos en Human Rights Foundation es el hecho de que nos enfocamos casi exclusivamente en países que consideramos que están gobernados por regímenes autoritarios. Es decir, no hacemos trabajo de derechos humanos por lo general en países que están gobernados por democracias, ¿no? La filosofía ya ustedes la intuirán, ¿no? De simplemente esa descripción de por qué hacemos esto. Primero, porque como organización de derechos humanos tenemos recursos limitados, ¿no? Como cualquier otra entidad, como un gobierno que tiene recursos limitados. La Comisión Interamericana de Derechos Humanos en Costa Rica tiene, perdón, en Washington tiene recursos limitados. La Corte Interamericana de Derechos Humanos en Costa Rica tiene recursos limitados. El Tribunal Europeo de Derechos Humanos en Estrasburgo tiene recursos limitados. La Corte Internacional de Justicia. Entonces, incluso las más altas cortes tienen recursos limitados. Por supuesto, una organización de derechos humanos también tiene recursos limitados. Entonces a uno se le presenta el dilema en el mundo real donde hay tantos problemas, donde hay tantas crisis, donde hay tantos abusos de derechos humanos, a qué cosas prestarle más atención, qué cosas priorizar. Y nosotros lo hemos decidido hacer con los países que no permiten el nivel de libertad interna que permita que se conozcan las cosas. Y esa es la característica que tienen los países autoritarios o gobernados por regímenes autoritarios versus los países democráticos. ¿Por qué? Nosotros, y aquí, ¿cómo nosotros determinamos qué país es democrático y qué país es autoritario? Nosotros tenemos un proyecto interno de un índice sobre democracia que lo vamos a lanzar en febrero del año que viene, junto a otros índices sobre democracia que se lanzan en esa época normalmente. Quien sea aquí estudiante de ciencias políticas o de derecho constitucional y esté familiarizado con este tema de democracia y dictadura, las definiciones, sabrá que hay los principales 3 índices, en mi opinión, sobre democracia son el índice de Freedom House, que se llama Freedom in the World, ¿no? Que clasifica a los países del mundo en libres, parcialmente libres y no libres, ¿no? Luego está el índice del Economist Intelligence Unit, de la revista famosa basada en el Reino Unido que se llama The Economist, que también tiene una clasificación en países autoritarios y democráticos de los países del mundo. Y finalmente está el índice de Babin, promovido principalmente por profesores, un grupo de profesores liderados por profesores de la Universidad de Gotemburgo en Dinamarca y que también clasifican los países así. Nosotros estamos lanzando otro índice porque creemos que estos 3 índices que mencioné tienen algunas cosas que son mejorables y que para nosotros como organización de activismo de derechos humanos siempre han sido un problema. Entonces para nosotros sería más fácil decir nuestros países autoritarios son los que en el índice de Babin salen aquí, o los que en el índice de Freedom House salen como no libres y como parcialmente libres. Pero hemos, por tanto, desarrollado nuestro propio índice. ¿Qué es lo que medimos principalmente con este otro índice? 3 factores, uno de los cuales es particularmente relevante para esta audiencia, porque presumo que todos tenemos alguna relación con el derecho aquí. El primer factor es la competencia electoral, que para los cientistas políticos es clave en definir una democracia versus una dictadura, la competencia electoral, que hayan elecciones cada 4, cada 5 años y que de verdad puedan competir los candidatos en estas elecciones de manera libre, número 1. Número 2, el derecho a la libertad de expresión, ¿no? Que es un derecho muy amplio y que comprende la libertad de prensa, la libertad de disentir y, por supuesto, en el public square test de la plaza pública que hizo el ex disidente soviético y profesor Nathan Sharansky es el factor principal, ¿no? Él dice, este test, el test de la plaza pública, dice, si uno no tiene la capacidad en su país de ir a la plaza pública y criticar al gobierno de turno, entonces uno no puede decir que vive en una sociedad libre, sino que estará viviendo en una sociedad de miedo, ¿no? Que en inglés tiene una rima porque entonces uno no puede decir que vive en un free society, sino en un fear society. Esa es la lógica del test de la plaza pública y la importancia del derecho a la libertad de expresión. Y el tercer pilar, y para cada pilar tenemos como 20 indicadores, una especie de cuestionario. El tercer pilar es la independencia del Poder Judicial, que también lo llamamos fiscalización institucional, que significa en la práctica, principalmente para nuestro índice, el hecho de que el Poder Judicial juegue el rol real de ser un control del poder. El Poder Judicial no es un facilitador de que el presidente haga lo que quiera. No es un facilitador de que el partido político de turno o el partido político más poderoso logre hacer lo que le dé la gana en la sociedad, sino que el Poder Judicial debe tratar de manera ecuánime para todos los actores del sistema político administrar el orden jurídico, ¿no? Entonces, ¿eso qué significa? Que si el día de mañana en Santo Domingo, bueno, en la República Dominicana, así como en cualquier otro país, llega un gobierno que comienza a perseguir a la oposición política, a encarcelar a periodistas independientes, a hacer este tipo de acciones, el Poder Judicial tiene que tener la valentía y la capacidad y la institucionalidad de ser un control de ese abuso de poder, ¿no? Entonces, nosotros en ese tercer factor vemos qué países del mundo tienen poderes judiciales que controlan los abusos del poder y qué países ya los han perdido esa capacidad de control del Poder Judicial a los abusos de poder. Y bajo esos tres pilares, nosotros clasificamos los más de 200 entre países y territorios que hay en el mundo, los clasificamos en autoritarismos puros o completos, autoritarismos híbridos y finalmente democracias, ¿no? Y para darles un pantallazo de lo que tenemos por ahora, tenemos que en el mundo hay 96 aproximadamente autoritarismos, ya sea autoritarismo completo o autoritarismo híbridos. Y por tanto, democracia solo hay como 100 y pico, ¿no? Y debido a las dinámicas de población que hay en el mundo y el hecho de que países altísimamente poblados son o dictaduras puras y duras, autoritarismo completo o autoritarismo híbridos, hace que el número de ciudadanos a los cuales afecta el autoritarismo es muy grande. Para darles un ejemplo concreto, China, Rusia, que son de los países más poblados del mundo, están controlados por dictaduras, ¿no? Vietnam, un país de más de 100 millones de personas, está controlado por una dictadura. El Partido Comunista sigue controlando, de hecho, tanto China como Vietnam. Y Rusia, sabemos, la dictadura de Vladimir Putin, que digamos, invadió Ucrania en años recientes y es una de las causas de las principales crisis a nivel mundial. Dictadura, país altamente poblado. Y finalmente India, que era la democracia más grande del mundo. Nosotros a partir del año pasado ya lo consideramos un país gobernado por un régimen autoritario híbrido debido a las políticas principalmente de persecución de la oposición política que ha llevado adelante el gobierno actual en la India. ¿Por qué es importante para nosotros como organización de derechos humanos primero entender al mundo en una de esas categorías, entender qué parte del mundo, qué países están gobernados por dictadura y qué países están gobernados por democracia? Porque no es solamente, las democracias no solamente protegen el derecho a la participación política, a elegir al presidente cada 5 años, a elegir a sus candidatos al Congreso, etcétera, sino que en una democracia, ese sistema muy imperfecto que es la democracia, muy imperfecto, muy problemático, que nos vuelve primates que cada 5 años lamentablemente nos vuelve más parecido a los chimpancés que queremos, o tribalistas que nos queremos pelear entre sí en todo el mundo, en Estados Unidos, en Alemania, en Noruega, al igual que en Bolivia, Nicaragua. Entonces, cuando hay democracia, ¿no? Cuando se pierde ese sistema tan imperfecto que nos vuelve, para enfatizar, es uno de los temas de investigación que yo tengo, nos vuelve rivalistas, ¿no? Yankees, Red Sox en el béisbol de Estados Unidos, liceístas y aguileños en Santo Domingo, aguilucho, perdón, aguilucho. Entonces, eso que parece que no nos aporta, que más bien nos hace no ser más cívicos, sino menos cívicos, es el mejor sistema. Sigue siendo el mejor sistema en alta medida porque nos permite que la oposición desnude para que toda la población vea las cosas que hace el gobierno de turno. Y después, cuando la oposición llega al gobierno, viceversa. Entonces, los medios de comunicación independientes que pueden ser más simpatizantes de uno u otro lado del espectro político, es normal eso. En Estados Unidos el New York Times es más de izquierda, el Wall Street Journal es más de derecha, es normal, ¿no? Eso hace que el país avance. Y cuando digo el país avance, ya no me refiero a los derechos políticos estrictamente o al derecho a la libertad de expresión, sino que avance en todas las demás áreas. Y algunas de esas áreas son las mencionadas aquí, ¿no? Derechos indígenas, prácticas culturales, temas migratorios. En los países democráticos es donde mejor y más se puede proteger el derecho a las minorías, de las minorías, ¿no? No porque a las mayorías les guste defender a las minorías, sino hasta porque simplemente los opositores del gobierno de turno van a tratar de identificar cualquier abuso y si ese abuso incluye minorías también lo van a identificar y lo van a... Los medios de comunicación independientes van a hacer eso, los intelectuales van a hacer eso, los escritores, etc. Entonces, los periodistas. Eso hace que las sociedades democráticas sean mejores en su protección de los derechos indígenas, ¿no? Por ejemplo, el libro de Mario Vargas Llosa, que recientemente falleció y que ustedes deben conocer, La fiesta del chivo, donde describe algunos de los peores abusos que se produjeron en este país bajo la dictadura de Rafael Leónidas Trujillo, menciona, por supuesto, algunos de los problemas que hubieron en su momento con el trato a los migrantes haitianos en un episodio de eso, ¿no? Bajo las dictaduras, los peores instintos del ser humano, porque todos los seres humanos tenemos nuestros ángeles y nuestros demonios, tenemos la capacidad de amar, de tener buenos amigos, de amar a nuestra familia, de ser miembros, de cantar cosas bonitas a favor de los liceístas o de los aguiluchos, pero también tenemos la capacidad de, a la hora que las condiciones se den, ir y cometer genocidio contra el otro lado. Y de hecho, como lo documentan libros como el del profesor Steven Pinker, el libro The Better Angels of Our Nature, los mejores ángeles de nuestra naturaleza, 99% de nuestra carga evolutiva en la historia de la humanidad, porque tenemos como 10 millones de años como homínidos antes de llegar al Homo sapiens, hace apenas 250.000 años, y dentro del Homo sapiens los periodos de paz más o menos comienzan o de mayor organización de la sociedad con el descubrimiento de la agricultura hace 12.000 años apenas. Durante gran parte de nuestra carga genética, biológica de interacción, tenemos precisamente la práctica de la redada, del genocidio, como las prácticas más comunes. Entonces, en los últimos 100 años hemos hecho, y tras los traumas de la Primera y la Segunda Guerra Mundial a nivel global, hemos hecho un progreso gigante en por lo menos condenar esas prácticas de manera pública y tenerlas legalizadas en la mayoría de los estados, la condena a ese tipo de prácticas. Entonces, termino mi intervención en esa nota positiva de que hoy en día tenemos un sistema universal de protección de derechos humanos que se le llama sistema universal, como saben aquí los abogados, a todo lo que está en el marco de la ONU, básicamente, y que incluye fenómenos como la Corte Internacional de Justicia, la Corte Penal Internacional, ¿no? el sistema universal, y luego los sistemas regionales, el sistema africano de protección de derechos humanos, el sistema interamericano de protección de derechos humanos, que tiene sus propios retos, dificultades, etcétera, pero que es un sistema sobre el que se puede trabajar. Y estos sistemas en alta medida actúan o deberían actuar como subsidiarios a los problemas de los países. Es decir, las democracias en los países, gracias a esta pugna entre la oposición y el gobierno de turno y a la libertad de los ciudadanos, las democracias protegen de manera imperfecta, pero sí protegen muchos derechos, la inmensa mayoría de los derechos de las personas, mientras que las dictaduras, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba, autoritarismos competitivos en América Latina nosotros consideramos autoritarismos híbridos al gobierno de Bolivia, al gobierno de El Salvador, de Honduras. Estas sociedades ya comienzan a tener serias deficiencias en cuanto a esas protecciones, y es allí donde la Comisión y la Corte Interamericana pueden jugar un rol muy importante. Así que con eso dejo la intervención y luego podemos pasar a la pregunta. With this overview that I gave Borys, I finished my intervention and we could do more Q&A later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for extremely interesting stories. As I did understand, you also mentioned Russian aggression against Ukraine as a conflict.
Did, very forcefully.
Or the totalitarianism and democracy. And just today we discussed with my colleagues the challenges for deontologic practices that are much broader from the bilateral issues and creates of situation, for example, of duties of lawyers and human defenders during the conflict. If you represent the participating states, if you defend human rights and participate in various cases. So it is all extremely crucial. It's including issues of the indigenous and minorities' rights. I think I will shortly present my vision on these issues, and then we'll go to questions and answers to all speakers, if it is possible. Okay? Okay, so I want to summarize the aspects of exactly indigenous rights in modern legal order in issues of peace building, recognitions, and damage claims. Let me remind that sources and practice of indigenous rights in modern world order started from the Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention of 1989 of number 179 of the International Labour Organization. But this treaty is extremely old one. It does not reflect the variety of indigenous peoples of modern world, especially in conditions of globalizations. But the crucial act, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, addresses individual and collective rights of indigenous peoples and has positively influenced the drafting of several constitutional statutes at the national and local levels, and contributed to progressive development of the international and national legal framework and policies. So some other treaties like biodiversity conventions and protocol to it that included Kunming Montreal Biodiversity Framework included the indigenous aspects, also the reference to indigenous peoples in the Pact for the Future, in the Global Digital Compact, and in the Declaration of Future Generations as the drafted documents of United Nations. But exactly the declarations of the right of indigenous people drafted during decades, and I'm happy that I was a participant of this drafting, referenced the recognition, respect, promotion, and protect the rights of indigenous peoples to their territories, lands, and ecosystems, while safeguarding their traditions, spiritual beliefs, and ancestral knowledge. And these issues rise in common challenges as discrimination, hate speech, stigmatization, racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, including committed against indigenous peoples. And also these documents, including the declaration, established a key principle of importance of free, private, and informed consent, as it is outlined in the declarations. Now, the acts of United Nations and other international bodies reflect the indigenous right. I may mention some documents regarding gender aspects of indigenous right, like General Recommendation number 39 of the Committee of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, as resolutions of the Commission Status of Women 49.7 of 2005, 56.4 of 2012, and also the the new declaration of World Health Assembly of 2023, 76.16, the health of indigenous peoples. It is also extremely important for these issues. Some specialized bodies works in this area on the United Nations platforms, like of the Special Rapport of the Rights of Indigenous People, Expert Mechanism of the Rights of Indigenous People, Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples, and United Nations Voluntary Fund on Indigenous People. Some other platforms are also used for the indigenous challenges, like Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change, and I'm happy to participate in 3 last Conference of Parties held in respectively Sharm el-Sheikh, Dubai, and Baku, with discussions about challenges on human rights and collective rights of indigenous people. Also, the temporal aspects of indigenous rights are important, as UN established International Day of Indigenous People that is celebrated every year on 9th of August. International Year of Indigenous Languages is going now, and the International Decade of Indigenous Languages started on 2022. And also speaking about the peace building processes that are extremely important in modern world in situation of erase of democracy, erase of world order, challenges to democracy states. The participation of indigenous people in such processes became extremely important. United Nations member states and entities jointly advanced the implementation of Special Resolution Right of Indigenous People, and this document adopted last year stressed the duty of indigenous people in peace building, including the possibility of dedicated United Nations Peace Building Commission meetings on this issue. And this is an event that was important for all indigenous people of the world to participate in these peace building processes, and including the last forum of Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues that was in New York this April, also was a step for next development of indigenous peace building activities. And these peace building activities are extremely important on the cases when indigenous people became the victims of war, victims of foreign occupations, and of war crimes, including genocidal attempts. That was shown, for example, of Russian occupation of Crimea, where Crimean Tatars were suffered all the relevant repressions, and the challenges of international law on this issue. For example, we had case in the International Court of Justice in case of 166 regarding the alleged violation of Convention of Racial Discrimination committed in Crimea. And this court agreed that Russia did violate this convention regarding the ethnic Ukrainians, but due to lack of good legal positions and good legal advice of Ukrainian authorities, this was not recognized, these violations were not recognized regarding the indigenous Crimean Tatars. But in some way, some other documents like decisions of the European Court on Human Rights, including the interstate claim and some individual applications that establish the issues of discrimination as a violation of Article 14 of European Convention on Human Rights. And I'm happy I also represent some victims in this European Court in individual cases, and we now entering to the stage of communication. Alice, this case are pending for a decade in the international courts. And of course, the challenges of claims and reparation are extremely crucial for indigenous people. And I want to stress that here we had the specific role of the representative body of indigenous people that are by definition non-governmental people and have no own authorized governments. And for example, in Ukraine now we have such challenge with Majlis of Crimean Tatar people that was recognized on political level as by Ukrainian government, so by the United Nations, OSCE, and various international structures as representing structure. But when we start to discuss about the damaging claims, when we start to discuss about indigenous claims and about the issues of violation of collective rights that damages, for example, environmental issues, that damages cultural issues, we need a body to pass the claim, to start the case in national or international proceedings. And sometimes we had problems with it. For example, now I am a lawyer who represents this body against Ukraine in case that is devoted to the finalizing of the legal recognition of this body in our administrative courts by our government, like representative bodies that will allow us to make some suits on the international level on damaged clays, for example, environmental issues due to destruction of the unique ecosystem that belongs to indigenous people, including maritime ecosystem, riparian, etc., etc. So here we have the unique development of modern international law on the collective rights, on the indigenous rights, and other related rights. It is reflected in decisions of international bodies. Else, it is sometimes connected with international crimes against indigenous peoples and relevant proceedings in international criminal justice. Also as human rights violations and relevant proceedings in the international human rights justice. But anyway, all those challenges are extremely important for us, for lawyers, as they give us the vision of next development of our work, of our efforts to defend persons, to defend entities, to defend peoples and indigenous peoples, also as minorities and other groups who need to protection of their rights. Thank you for your attention, and on this occasion, I want to wish extremely fruitful work for all World Law Congress, all the sessions and panels, and to elaborate a good recommendation to national governments and international structures. Thank you. So, I may offer a Q&A session if participating members of World Law Congress have question to panelists, they may ask. I think we should first give floor to the room and to see the interesting issues for the audience.
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Javier and Borys, for this presentation. My name is John Guerrero. I am a member of the UNESCO Chair and Academic Dependency of the Autonomous University of Santo Domingo. I have a question. Can you share with us some good practices in order to protect the human rights of migrants and to develop some community peace-building actions? Because here we are living a very particular difficult situation with Haitian migrants. So, well, that's my question.
Thank you.
So, dear colleagues, who will be ready to respond? I think both of you have some ideas on this issue.
I have a question. What the Asian migrants? Haitian. I thought you said Asian. Okay. Yes. I mean, Peter, feel free to jump in if you have any recommendations as to best practices. I mean, the main virtue, to keep it in line with my original presentation on democracies versus authoritarian regimes, the main virtue of democracy is that it allows for the ugly things that happen in society, like racism, like xenophobia. These things are very common, by the way. Like, as I mentioned, we have, the human nature is complex, and it has, if you will, a good side and a bad side. On the good side, we're loving of our kin, of our family, of our group, of our country, of our nation, whatever. But on the other side, we can be, if we don't educate ourselves and control our bad instincts on some occasions, we can be xenophobic, we can be racist, we can be homophobic, essentially be against minorities. So I wouldn't say that the solution for the issue of racism or discrimination against minorities, migrant minorities, I wouldn't say that the solution is simple. I mean, definitely it's not simple. It's a very complex solution. There is no silver bullet solution, but it's a multi-pronged solution. You have to, first, I think, in order to get to the before lawyers get involved, I think it's important that you get to the heart of people, that you get to the minds of people, that you get to convince them that it is a worthwhile cause to protect the rights of minorities. And this you achieve through films, TV shows, celebrities speaking out. Like if Big Papi says something about minorities, Haitian migrants in the Dominican Republic, he's likely to change more hearts and minds than if you and your entire NGO spend a month working with Haitian folks before courts. That is part of what needs to be done, and that's the role of lawyers. But you also have to think, you as lawyers can create a nonprofit that devotes time and effort and resources to this, and within this nonprofit, you can try to produce a film, you can try to engage celebrities, like I mentioned, Pedro Martinez, Big Papi, to do this, Juan Soto this year's, right? To advocate in a certain direction, and then also have the legal strategy to do that. That would be, and it's a work in progress, and it's not gonna solve issues. For example, the United States, which for decades was a leader, and especially after the civil rights, struggle in the 1960s, it was, I would say, a leader in dealing with the issue of racism in a good way, and to the point that President Barack Obama was the first African American president in the 2000s. When you listen to the leaders of the Republican Party, the right-wing party, the center-right party, and the Democratic Party, the left-wing party, the center-left party, they were all very grateful for the work of migrants in the United States, Mexican migrants, migrants from everywhere in Latin America, as a generally net positive force. Like they did work that Americans didn't want to do. They did so many good things. So this was what was the common understanding. Unfortunately, this new administration, the second administration of Republican administration under President Trump, has profited a little bit from these lower, in my opinion, lower instincts of part of society, which again is normal, and this obviously is creating problems. So it's not, you're gonna give 2 steps forward, but there is gonna be a step backward. But I think what is happening right now, for example, in the US, is only gonna make people more, I think, aware of the plight of immigrants, or the plight of minorities, and that should be a net positive in the long run. But yeah, that would be my advice: be multi-pronged, get to the hearts and minds of people.
I would like you to tell me one more time, what protection are you thinking about, so I can refresh my answer. Your question, in one word.
Thank you. My question is, can you share with us some good experience or advice in order to protect the human rights of migrants?
Thank you very much. Now, as you can see, let me make this general statement. Whatever you say at the United Nations level is not what you find at the base level when you go to communities, because whatever you say, whatever number you give to proclamation you make at the United Nations, that the communities are going to deal with the reality they have very far away from New York, where the United Nations sit. So when you talk about protection of minorities, again, I have to tell you, like I have shown in what is going on in Nigeria, it becomes a paradox that the Fulani, like I said, are quite insignificant in their number, but they have taken over the majority people that they're living with, and they're wielding power over them. So now, if you begin to talk about minority, then you begin to talk about exactly where you're going. Now, you see, the essence of, when you talk about minority then, one thing applies. Whether you go up or you go down, it's about wielding of power. You know, what it means is this. If you are in minority and you find yourself in power, then you do everything you can to subdue the majority so that you can retain power. If you are in majority and you have power, then of course the minority will be at your mercy of whatever you give out to them. So there's no, like I said, there's no quick fix to that. What has happened, for instance, in Nigeria, let me use that example. I told my friend Javier when we started, what has happened in Nigeria is that it's not a totalitarian state. It's not a dictatorship. You know, you have your say, and they have their way. You have a right to take your grievance to any level you want for your protection. You can go to court, but the courts will last your lifetime. It will take you all that time to decide what matter. So while you're doing that, then you know how to look after yourself. But nobody stops you from saying what you like, but you can't force them to do what you like. I'm trying to put all these things in simple terms, so that in realistic terms, so you don't read off the books, but then you want to apply how you survive in a community. But the danger actually in African countries, for instance, is that the voting populace do not know where they want their good to come from. They do not vote right like you do in the developed communities. You know what I'm saying? They vote for the same people who are doing the things they're complaining about for a pittance. At election time, they come, they tell them the same stories, give them money. You can't explain that. And then they go back to the cycle of complaining until another election time. So when it comes to minority rights, the whole thing is about agitation, like you said, people, knowledgeable people who come out to make all the noises about what is not going right. But most times, once you cross the line into power, people who get into power from the people who have been complaining oftentimes say, well, it's not the way you think. That being in government is different from when you're out of government. There are a lot of things to consider. So, but what I think we should all do is to enforce the laws. That's when you come about the rule of law. That's when you come about World Jurist Association. If you enforce the laws basically, and you don't oppress people, or in other words, government becomes self-accounting. Let me use that word. And it's not impossible, because it's all about listening to who you vote for, and that brings me back to where I started. All the things that are said in the election cycle, in some climates, in some areas, they work. They listen to you. They know you say you're going to do it. Forget about those who are lying when they are campaigning. Of course, you know that happens. They lie to you, and then when they get to power, they don't do what they say they will do. But then the other side is that many people don't listen to those who have said things different from the other man, and they go and vote for the other man, leaving the man who has said something. Maybe he doesn't have the money to spend, he doesn't have the connection to pull out what he's doing. But you see, at every point in time, when you want to get yourself out of trouble, you have to participate fully. So, and as we have seen in parts of Africa are getting out of it. I mean, you saw what happened in South Africa with the leadership of Mandela. That's where leadership of a man comes into play. It happened in many other places, So what I'm suggesting is we have to be part of getting ourselves out of that trap of suffering because we are, we have a disadvantage. Either maybe because we're in a minority, and then because you see, I have to end this way. I've spoken a lot about the Middle Belt, and I give it to you in a graphic term. My uncle told me, my uncle was running mate to Chief Awolowo. He was vice presidential candidate to Chief Awolowo, who ran for president of Nigeria in 1979. Now, I speak with him a lot. Of course, I became presidential candidate of a political party in 2023. I ran an election, I was on television, so I know what I'm saying. But my uncle told me, because I always talk with him, of blessed memory, he said, these people you're talking about, they will say, give you all the promises that you want, but the moment their oppressors walk into the room, they will lose it. If you get my point. So my point is, they will shout from rooftops how they want to change it, but the moment those people that are oppressing them get into the room, they all disappear. They don't muster that will, you know what I'm saying, to change what they want to do for themselves. And I learned it. Even when you're going, the younger ones tell you that the elder disappoint them. That after all the shout, after all the banging on the table, suddenly the older ones will call them well and begin to say in words you don't understand as a young man, say, well, you know, these things don't go like that. You have to. What doesn't go like that? It's time to push the man off the cliff. And you're saying, no, wait. What are you waiting for? If you get my point. So when it comes to minorities, I think it's many years of pulverization, of you know, it's gotten into them, and maybe that's what's happening. Whatever you see people not coming out of the cycle they find themselves. They need a lot of mind reset. And I think that's very important. So I don't want to begin to go about what the law says, what says here, but I think you have to help yourself get out of trouble. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me also give a short example, one case regarding the migrants' rights to understand the situation and legal mechanism. My own sister with her former husband relocated from Crimea from 2014 to Ukraine's mainland, and this for relocation after the occupation of Crimea and enforced attempt to make them Russian citizens was a ground to a K application to the European Court on Human Rights. It was 11 years ago. Approximately 10 years ago, this case started in the European Court on Human Rights. Later, as you may know, Russia committed broad-scale aggression against Ukraine, and my sister divorced to the time, and later she, with her new husband, relocated from Ukraine to Canada, and now she resides there. She migrated again, and now she resides in Canada near the border with US. And we have a family joke: will you migrate again if the US will try to annex Canada? But all the jokes may be jokes, but this case in European case was pending for 10 years, and just in this year it started to be communicated with parties. So I think in maybe 2 or 3 next years we'll see the decision of human case regarding migrants, as especially the issues of it was the issues of discrimination, as my sister's husband was a representative of indigenous peoples, and the legal reaction on international level to the simplest violations of human rights will be, but it will be in 1.5 decade after the event started, and all this person's life changed sometimes. And it was not reflected in this decision. The European Court reserved just the events of 2014, not of 2022, not of not of the events of 2025. This how today's international law works, and our task and our effort is to make it law more, to make it to work more effective. Thank you. And if you have more questions, you are welcome, but we have, I think, a briefly schedule, so I think one more question is extremely good.
Hi, everyone, and thank you all for your participation. So my question is trying to relate the topic of democracy with the rights of indigenous people. So for either of you to answer, I would like to know if you consider that at the current time, indigenous people have a real participation or government representation in democracy? And if the answer is no, what would you say are the biggest challenges to achieve this real participation and representation of indigenous people in government democracy and state representation in general?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think please give me a float for a short answer, and then my colleagues will continue, as I think I'll have a bit limit for my Zoom. So I will just give you one example of democracy and indigenous rights. I mentioned today the Majlis of Crimea Tatar people. It is a representative body of indigenous people, and it was elected. It was elected by the direct vote of Crimean Tatars who resided in Crimea. They elected their Congress, Kurultai, and this Congress elected members of Majlis. 33 of members of Majlis were elected by the Congress, about 200 or 300 delegates, and it was this procedure started in 1991. It was first time elected Kurultai, and it was re-elected every 4 years, as it was established by statute of this body, till last time it was elected in 2013, 1 year before Russia occupied Crimea, banned the Majlis and banned the indigenous rights in the region. And just regarding the democracy, we have one challenge. The group of Majlis members, the representative body of indigenous people, relocated from Crimea to mainland of Ukraine. But it was 11 years ago. They were not elected. And this body is in exile, de facto, is also a victim of a conflict, because before 2013, it was a democratic body elected by indigenous, and it gave it a political mandate to have discussion with Ukrainian authorities, with European bodies, with international structures, defending the right of this indigenous group. But now it is just conservated like a body in exile. And for example, now I'm a lawyer who represents Majlis in Ukrainian court against Ukraine to finalize the legalization of this body as its legal entity. But we have a direct problem because it was elected not 4 years, but 11, 12 years ago. This is an example how democracy sometimes makes challenges for the indigenous people. And of course, we may take into account the Declaration of Indigenous People foresees the own rights of indigenous people, establish their nation, their ethnic or people's institution, but their own will. States could not demand for indigenous peoples to construct extremely democratic body. For example, some indigenous people have own monarchies, and it's their rights. They have own monarchs, and it is also guaranteed by the international law. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I will quickly try to classify the issue of indigenous people, because under international law, that is international law as international law, then if you talk about indigenous people, then you may be talking about the American Indians, and then, or you may be talking about the Aborigines, in Australia. Those are the wide aspect of indigenous people. Of course, we know what mortal fate they have faced. They almost suffered extinction in America, and you know what is happening in Australia, how they're bringing them back. But having gone to that international sphere, when you bring it down to the local level, there's a saying I read up trying to figure out politics, that those who come from outside always have the advantage to win those who have remained at home. In other words, political power is invariably taken by people who have come from outside back home, and somehow that's how it goes. I don't know if you find the studies that have sustained that, but otherwise, if you talk about indigenous people as indigenous people, it becomes difficult for you in a national setting. In an international setting, yes, they don't have a chance because those who have conquered them don't even broke this talk. They don't want to listen to what you are saying about these rights. But if it's on a national level, like in Nigeria, like I told you, it was the Fulani Jihad that came to the Hausa land and conquered them, subdued them with warfare and guile, and took over the whole place. And the Fulani are in minority, and the indigenous people are in majority. And they have put in their political rulership over them. So anywhere you have, of course, like I said, they've taken their language, the Hausa language as the lingua franca, so they all speak Hausa, but the rulers are from that tiny stock of Fulani. And they are the emirs in the large swath of land that are owned by these people. So, and then you begin to wonder how you're going to help them get out of this. They are trying to, now politically. The only way they can do that is to get their votes together and vote the other way. And until they do that, I don't see anywhere anybody can help them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues. Alice, I think I should leave this meeting as my possibility to be internet finalized now. So I wish you have a good day. And if you have to continue, if your schedule allows you to continue question and answers, of course, you are welcome. And I wish again the best achievements to Old World Bloc Congress and the most fruitful results of its work. And have a good day in Dominicana. Bye.